Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed News Corner. You know things are going well in the world of PC hardware when in the space of a week, you hear multiple reports about different companies all saying they're expecting huge declines in demand and sales. What a wonderful world we live in where AI sucks everything up and gamers pay the price. The most interesting of these statements was from AMD's official earnings call. AMD CFO Jean Hu said that the company expects second half gaming revenue to decline more than 20% compared to the first half. CEO Lisa Su said that second half demand in gaming will be impacted by higher memory and component costs, and we are planning the business accordingly. I mean, yeah, gamers aren't building PCs at the moment because key parts like DDR5 are ludicrously expensive, so it makes sense AMD aren't expecting good things for that division in the next few quarters. But things are looking more dire for manufacturers that rely on bigger companies like AMD and Nvidia, who can just pump up their revenue through selling AI chips. According to a report from DigiTimes, the four big motherboard vendors are all expecting sales to fall by 25% or even more in some cases in 2026 compared to 2025. Asus, the world's largest consumer motherboard company, shipped 15 million units in 2025, but may only ship 10 million in 2026, according to this report. MSI and Gigabyte are bracing for a 25% drop in shipments, and ASRock a 30% drop. Now, these companies do have other divisions that make all sorts of other products, including components for AI servers, which are all the rage these days, but there is no doubting that divisions focusing on consumer products are in for a pretty rough year. And this puts a lot of other parts vendors at serious risk. Companies that focus solely on the gaming market can't just offset a decline in PC sales by selling a ton of AI products. And no, they can't just slap AI on a case. That's not how it works. You can't make an AI case. There's no point doing that. If gamers aren't buying motherboards because DRAM is overpriced, they're not going to be building PCs, so they aren't going to buy components like cases or coolers either, and they're certainly not going to buy an AI case. So let's hope we don't see any gaming vendors go bust this year as the unrelenting AI bubble sucks everything up in its quest for building an absurd number of data centers. Another curious story I saw this week relates to Asus's GeForce RTX 5070 Ti models. Now, you might remember from earlier this year, Asus explicitly told us that they had placed their RTX 5070 Ti models into end-of-life status, and then later reversed that stance through a series of interesting statements. RTX 5070 Ti's have clearly been hard to come by this year, with stock sitting well above MSRP at $1,000 US and demand falling off a cliff. This week, a report emerged from Channelgate claiming that actually Asus are effectively placing some models into end-of-life status after all. So this would be a reversal of the decision to end production. The report states, as translated by WCCF Tech, that starting in Q2, Asus is adjusting its sales strategy for its high-end graphics card series. Due to changes in the upstream GPU supply landscape, the supply of certain models may tighten. It is recommended that end users and distributors nationwide adjust their sales focus accordingly. Asus will continue to reduce the supply of the RTX 5070 Ti series. The factory will primarily focus on selling a few mainstream models, while related production capacity will gradually shift to the RTX 5080 series. The report goes on to say that the 5080 must maintain its current market share and will be a priority for the DIY market. This sounds an awful lot to me like Asus are effectively pulling their higher-end 5070 Ti models from production, like the ROG Strix and maybe the Tough Gaming models, while continuing to trickle out a few mainstream cards, presumably the Prime and Prime OC. So the story of the Schrodinger's 5070 Ti continues. Remember, back in January, Nvidia claimed that they are continuing to ship all GeForce SKUs. But that was always a meaningless statement. Shipping one or two 5070 Ti GPUs to AIBs well below normal levels classifies as continuing to ship that model. The proof of whether the 5070 Ti situation remains as normal or whether supply has been cut is in actual retail supply and availability. We're certainly going to find out if this Asus story is accurate based on whether you can purchase high-end 5070 Ti models in the next few months. In fact, right now on Newegg, only the Prime and Tough Gaming models are listed, all at above $1,000 US. The ROG Strix model is gone. Now, if you've been spending a lot of 2026 complaining about DDR5 memory prices, there's good news on the horizon. DDR6 is coming relatively soon. And no, I don't mean the good news is that DDR6 is going to be affordable and solve the memory crisis. There is just absolutely no way that will happen if the demand of today continues for several more years. No, what I actually mean is there's good news if you love complaining about memory prices, because with DDR6, there's a whole new generation to complain about. According to Korean outlet The Elec, the three major DRAM manufacturers, so Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, have begun preliminary development on DDR6 substrates with substrate manufacturers. These companies are currently manufacturing initial prototypes, despite the DDR6 standard not actually being finalized at JEDEC, the body in charge of DRAM standards. Not that this is unusual, of course, as the memory vendors typically work on designs ahead of the final spec, and for DDR6, a draft spec was completed at the end of 2024. So what can we expect from DDR6 memory? The general expectation at the moment is that bandwidth will double compared to DDR5 memory. The official DDR5 spec tops out at a transfer rate of 8.8 gigatransfers per second, while DDR6 is expected to top out at 17.6 gigatransfers per second. Newer form factors are also expected to be more widely used in the DDR6 generation, including CAM2, which is technically supported with DDR5 but is rarely deployed. We're also still a fair way off DDR6 mass production, which is expected to begin in 2028 or 2029, meaning the DDR5 generation will last for 8 or 9 years in total. This would align with what AMD has been saying about the AM5 platform, which uses DDR5 memory. AM5 is officially supported through to 2027 plus, with the plus indicating potential support in future years. I think we all expect AM6 to use DDR6 memory, so support for AM5 ending in 2027 would align with a new platform in 2028 or maybe 2029 utilizing faster memory. What would also be nice to see on those platforms is an increase in PCIe specification. Currently we're on PCIe 5.0, but this week PCI SIG released their draft 0.5 specification for PCIe 8.0. Yep, that's right, PCIe 8.0. The final specification isn't expected until 2028, and then usage in actual devices well beyond that. But considering the PCIe 6.0 specification has been final since 2022, surely deployment of that spec can't be too far away. In AMD motherboard news, rumors have started to circulate that a new generation of AMD motherboards might be shown at Computex in just a few weeks. This all started when BioStar put out a press release claiming they will present their next generation AMD and Intel 800 series motherboards at the show. However, BioStar later corrected this statement to just say they will present AMD and Intel 800 series motherboards, removing the reference to next generation. Later, they reached out to WCCF Tech and clarified they are only releasing new 800 series boards, not any new generation of AMD boards. While that BioStar report was a bit of a bust, that didn't stop known leaker Megasize GPU from claiming that the next generation of AM5 motherboards will still use the PROM21 chipset from the 600 and 800 series, but with fundamental changes to the BIOS and RAM support. It could also bring full support for QDIM and CAM memory formats. Those changes would be, I guess okay, but the PROM21 chipset is pretty outdated and in desperate need of a proper refresh to go along with Zen 6 CPUs. The main issue with this chipset is its single PCIe 4.0 x4 link to the CPU, limiting all devices routed through the chipset to PCIe 4.0 speeds. On current AM5 motherboards, if you want PCIe 5.0 functionality, you have to connect devices directly to the CPU. And on top of that, due to limited link bandwidth, the number of devices you can connect to the chipset is limited, especially relative to Intel platforms that tend to offer more PCIe connectivity. Hopefully, AMD doesn't decide to use this chipset for the third consecutive time and actually deploy something with more advanced functionality. It's just a rumor at this stage, but I'm sure we'll learn more at Computex 2026. In more bizarre news this week, although maybe not so bizarre when you look into it, Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick claimed this week that PC gamers are not the company's core consumer when it comes to Grand Theft Auto 6. In an interview with Bloomberg, Zelnick said, "Rockstar always starts on console because I think with regard to a release like that, you're judged by serving the core. Like really serving the core consumer. If your core consumer isn't there, if they're not served first and best, you kind of don't hit your other consumers. Historically, Rockstar's gone to console first." Now, obviously, you would think that PC gamers actually are a core audience for Rockstar and Take-Two. After all, PC is the world's largest gaming platform, and as far as platforms that GTA 6 will ship on, it would be right up there with PlayStation, if not larger, and certainly larger than Xbox. So in the current landscape where PC gaming is so massive and so popular, it doesn't make a ton of sense to claim that PC is not really a core audience. It also doesn't make a ton of sense from the perspective that in the same interview, Zelnick said that now with regard to a big title, PC can be 45–50% of the sales. Obviously, he is aware of the size of the PC platform, so why wouldn't GTA 6 launch on PC at the same time as consoles based on that information? Why are they still sticking with the core audience first? One explanation for this is the obvious one, which is double dipping. A lot of PC gamers also own a console to play games exclusive to that platform. Release GTA 6 first on the consoles, slurp up all those delicious sales, and then later release a PC version with enhanced graphics or something like that, and then get PC gamers who already bought the console version to buy it again. Two sales from the same customer, very simple thought process, and you can see why with a massive release, Rockstar can get away with it. The other angle relates to revenue brought in from each platform. Leaked revenue figures from GTA Online have apparently revealed that while PC gamers are still quite active, at least to the same levels as some Xbox platforms, the amount of revenue they bring in is just a fraction of console gamers. This data suggests that Rockstar makes about 5 times as much per player from those gaming on PlayStation 5 than on PC. This could be due to many reasons, such as the availability of custom multiplayer servers on PC like 5M, but with revenue from the live service elements of GTA in mind, it does appear that console gamers far outspend PC gamers, and this would mean that consoles are the core audience for Rockstar from a business perspective. So from this perspective, the justification for launching on console first would be to ensure that as many gamers have their primary GTA 6 copy on console, where they are more likely, based on Rockstar's data, to provide ongoing revenue. If that pool was diluted by sending a bunch of people off to PC, so for example, if someone was buying just one copy of GTA 6 and they were only going to buy one copy, and you sent that person off to PC instead of getting that person to own the copy on PlayStation, it could hurt their revenue. Of course, I'd like to see GTA 6 launch simultaneously on PC, but businesses are going to make business decisions. Another interesting gaming story from this week came from a Eurogamer interview with Resident Evil Requiem producer Masato Kumazawa. Eurogamer asked about his reaction to Nvidia's DLSS 5 reveal, which heavily used Resident Evil Requiem to market the supposed improvements this technology would bring. This showcase led to a ton of criticism, especially around how DLSS 5 changed the look of Grace, with many gamers describing the look as AI slop or like a bad Instagram filter. Kumazawa said that the fact a lot of players commented they really liked the original design of Grace and didn't want to see it change was a positive. It meant we got the design right, and points to the fact that Grace quickly established herself as a fan favorite that people had such strong opinions on her design. That's certainly not a resounding endorsement of the DLSS 5 output. He's saying here that his team got the original design for Grace right. He didn't go into details on the team's involvement with DLSS 5, but sometimes when you don't say something, it says a lot, if you know what I mean. Personally, I'm actually quite interested to see DLSS 5 in person, so hopefully Nvidia will have some hands-on demos at Computex in a few weeks. I was not at all impressed with what Nvidia originally showed off personally, but to be fair, some of the examples like Grace in Resident Evil were really bad. Maybe when actually using the technology, it comes across in a different light. I'm not expecting that it will, but it would be interesting to see at the very least. Couple of other topics to round this one out. AMD has posted their first patch on the path to enabling HDMI 2.1 in Linux. This is a milestone moment because up until now, people using AMD GPUs in Linux have been unable to use HDMI 2.1 due to licensing issues. Essentially, AMD's GPU driver is open source. The HDMI forum weren't a fan of allowing HDMI 2.1 support in their type of open source code that was needed to run it, so they ended up blocking it. Nvidia uses a different pipeline for HDMI 2.1 in their driver/firmware architecture, so HDMI 2.1 has been available in Linux on Nvidia GPUs for a while now. Anyway, the latest AMD GPU driver patch for Linux adds the first component of proper HDMI 2.1 support for AMD GPU users while maintaining its open source status. This patch adds FRL support, FRL being the faster link speeds introduced with HDMI 2.1, like 48 gigabits per second. So higher bandwidth monitors can now be used over HDMI 2.1 at the proper speeds HDMI 2.1 supports. However, HDMI 2.1 includes a collection of technologies that aren't just the higher bandwidth FRL modes. The spec also introduced support for DSC, variable refresh rates, auto low latency mode, and several other features. Currently, these features are not supported in the Linux AMD GPU driver, though DSC is being tested, and AMD are hopeful of providing full HDMI 2.1 support in future patches. So that's a nice thing for those people that want to play games on Linux. Lastly, I just want to touch briefly on a story that did the rounds last week, claiming that GPU AIB Galax was exiting the graphics card market, with operations being taken over by Palette. If you read those reports and haven't seen any updates since, well, that report was wrong. Galax will continue to exist and is still producing and developing graphics cards. The only thing that's changing is the management of the brand is being centralized at the Palette headquarters. So, a complete nothing of a story, really. This situation never made a ton of sense, as Palette already owned Galax and wouldn't have any reason to shut down the brand. Palette acquired Galax way back in 2008 and has been operating as a subsidiary, or a division I guess, ever since, even creating popular series like Hall of Fame after the acquisition. Palette operates several other brands as well, including Gainwood and KFA2. Shutting down Galax for seemingly no reason while keeping, say, Gainwood operating would be bizarre to say the least. But anyway, it's not happening. That report was wrong. So anyway, that's it for this episode of News Corner. Just a couple of things that I found interesting this week that I wanted to talk about, share my thoughts, maybe some slight analysis of some of those topics. But yeah, news. Let's get back into it from time to time. Anyway, if you do want to support Hardware Unboxed, we've got Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. Discord community, monthly live streams, BTS content, plenty of other good stuff. You all know the drill by now. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.